Welcome to Power Hour, where the editors of Powersports Business interview the movers and shakers of the industry. This episode is brought to you by Synchrony.
Hi, everybody. It's Brendan, the Powersports Business, and we got two special guests today with Pied Piper. Is it Pied Piper Inc. or Pied Piper Research?
Pied Piper Management Company, but just Pied Piper.
Pied Piper. Everyone knows Pied Piper. So we have Fran O'Hagan and Cameron O'Hagan with us, and we're going to talk about what lessons that powersports dealers can learn from automotive dealers and from the car industry in general, from that dealership model, and what car dealers do differently or maybe more consistently than a powersports dealer typically. Not that anybody's, there's no necessarily wrong answers, but there's a lot to learn. So, but with that, Fran, thank you. And Cameron, thanks for coming on. Let's continue on where we were a little bit just a second ago, talking about what kind of the metrics and what you guys do as Pied Piper, how you're measuring those invisible things that we were talking about, that the metrics and things that dealers maybe aren't seeing right plain as day, but once they get a report and they can look at they see that data and they go, I see where we can improve,
Sure. So, well, first of all, great to talk with you again. And I would say that the auto industry and the power sports industry have some things in common, but I probably would argue not as much as people would imagine. You look at a car dealership, you look at a power sports dealership, there's a sales department, a service department, parts department, a title clerk, and there's inventory, but there are important big differences. And we'll share some stats that show how differently those businesses are run. And at Pied Piper, we've discovered that easily the highest return on investment for power sports dealerships is to pay attention to the invisible behaviors. And that's what we specialize in. If somebody comes to us and says, hey, can you help me get my salespeople to sell better in person? I probably would say wander around your dealership more often and you'll be able to do that yourself without any of our help.
Yeah.
But when it comes to customers contacting dealerships through their website or service customers calling to make appointments, those are the invisible behaviors where what we do, our measurement and reporting, can make a really big difference. Couple of insights though. If you think about, if we all go on a field trip and we talk to a general manager of any car dealership and we say to them, hey, are processes important? They'll look at us like we're nuts. They'll say 100% of what we do is processes. We do things the way we do them because these are the processes that generate the best profit. Nobody gets to decide, oh no, I like to do it this way or I like to do it that way. We turn the crank and out comes profit. So that's one point. But the other point is the typical car dealership is far, far larger than the typical power sports dealership. And some of those processes are very, very different. And I'll give you an example. So if a car dealer is talking with us about responding to web leads, and they say to us, hey, what's the best practice? In other words, how quickly and in what manner do I need to respond to web leads to generate the highest inventory, highest turnover? We would say within 15 minutes and through multiple paths. So you need to respond to this web customer within 15 minutes. You need to do it by calling them, by sending an email, by sending them a text, all three of them.
Right.
Now, and no car dealership would argue with that. They might say, we don't do that. We're not good enough with our process. There's that word again. Now let's shift gears and talk about a power sports dealership that has 15 employees total.
Yeah. And that could be high.
So is it the same for them? Absolutely not. That's just not reality. You know,
Right.
at the car dealership, they either use an outsourced BDC, or they might have 4 or 5 people who work at the dealership just responding to web leads.
They're like the CRM managers or whatever
Right.
that, you know, and I think car dealers have embraced that model, the CRM model, more so in a lot of ways than Powersports. I think we're starting to learn it, you know,
Right.
or we're starting to understand the power of that. But, you know, it's kind of like what you said earlier. We also have a lot leaner staff than majority of car dealers, you know.
That's it. So if we shift gears and talk, hey, if a Powersports dealer contacts and they're a small dealership
Yeah.
and says, hey, what should we do? We will say, respond once a day. Don't go home at the end of the day with digital customers locked up in your store any more than you would go home with a physical
Right.
customer still wandering around
Leaving
the store.
somebody on hold indefinitely, you know.
That's
like,
it.
I used to work at
That's
a parts store, and that phone line would be blinking, and I'm like, oh God, who's on that line? I put them on hold, and I'm like,
That's it.
I gotta answer it, you know. And yeah, you gotta
That's it.
you gotta pick up, and you gotta. I think the end of the day, you like you said, if they're in that bucket, if they've filled something out in that 24, you've got 24 hours really of that
Right.
time. But I think by the end of the day, you should be responding in some
That's
way
it.
or another, you know.
And if the small dealership says to us, oh, we're already doing that, we're doing a good job, then I would say to them, okay, now do it faster. You know, try to do it within an hour as often as you can.
Right.
Can't do it all the time.
Quicker, it's
Yes.
even better because
That's
you have
exactly right.
time to change your mind, you know.
So that is a web response example.
Yeah.
But another example is the volume of after sales, the volume of service.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to an executive who runs one of the big dealer groups that has 200, 300, 500 dealerships, a top executive, and you say to them, okay, two topics, new car sales and after sales. Which one do you spend more of your time thinking about? After sales, by far.
That's where the money is.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Especially on that dealership side, because their margins, well, I mean, same as Powersports, but for whatever reason, we seem to, you know, there's always a lack of technicians everywhere, even in car dealers.
Sure.
But service departments, I think, are not as optimized as they could be, because if you know where those after sales, like you said, after sales, not just service, but PG&A and all those other things where you can make higher profit, higher margins, you know,
right.
Putting effort into that.
I'll also tell you that the capable car dealerships, if you talk to those executives again, they are riveted on what can I do to keep those 4, 5, 6-year-old car owners from leaving.
Yeah.
Because the moment they go to Discount Tire, or the moment they go to Pep Boys, or the moment they go to independent shop, they're gone. We don't see them anymore. So they work so hard to grab a hold of those with both hands. And now if you shift over and think about Powersports, that's definitely something the Powersports dealers can learn from. Do everything you can to avoid losing your service customers.
Right. And to be able to know when to send out, you know, like to use your CRM, I think to pull out like to those reminders, like, hey, it's time for a service interval, you know, try to bring them in. And, you know, especially you buy a new unit. I think one of our contributors has talked about this for a while, that you've got like basically 3 years from that they're going to come in for service work, but you've got 3 years to kind of turn them into a real customer, a regular customer, you know.
So would it be helpful to show you some math, some differences between auto industry and Powersports? We have some. Cameron,
you got some charts here. You got the power. If you can
go ahead, Cam. Do you want to share your screen?
I can share screen. Let's see. All right.
Okay.
So the first screen here is comparing power sports industry and auto industry for internet lead effectiveness. So we did the same exact study and process for both industries, where we have a large sample of dealerships
Really?
for both industries, and we select a real model in inventory and ask, hey, I'm interested in X. Is it available for me to come in and see? And then see what the response over the next 24 hours is. And this is a chart of so there's about 30 or more measurements, but this is condensed down to the more important and interesting ones.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And I mean, I'm interested to see like the phone to website customer within that we're +5 on the power sports side in that department. Even though, well, I don't get, okay, so 50% versus 66% covered, but they're -2 and we're +5.
Yeah,
That's a change over last year, yes?
yeah. The in parentheses number is a change since last year.
Oh, since last year. Okay, so
Yep.
I got it. Now I'm viewing it.
For the respective industries. Yeah,
Well,
I'd say
still, we've gotten better. Where I look at these areas where, but generally looking at the numbers, then customer received no response of any type. We lowered, both of them lowered that measurement, but Power Sports is higher by 3 points. Percentage of dealers with a less than 80 score.
So that's more than 80.
More than 80. Yeah,
so-
you know what? I forgot my math.
So, Brendan, a score of more than 80 basically means you did everything perfectly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
13% of the time compared to 40% of the time. And a score under 40 basically means that you didn't personally respond. You might have sent out an auto response. So
Okay.
that happens 42% of the time for power sports compared to 19 for auto. But the other thing that I find interesting, Brendan, if you look at did both.
Okay.
So that says I responded by email or text and also called all within 24 hours, twice as often for the car guys
pretty
compared
much
to
twice as often.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of comes down to a numbers game, really, right? So as far as if you can get your processes right, like you were saying, Fran, both of you guys, if you get your processes in order and are able to be consistent with it, you can be up there in that, auto dealer range of did both. I think that's a metric that's a key metric. I think that power sports dealers should look at going after that, those response times, again.
Brendan, there's another fact that is probably the most important from this whole chart. So and by the way, there are plenty of power sports dealers who score over 80. They do everything right.
Yeah. Right.
This is just an average for the whole industry.
Yeah.
But if you have a bucket of power sports dealers who score under 40, meaning they don't personally respond within 24 hours, you have another bucket of power sports dealers who consistently score over 80. They do everything right. The ones who score over 80 sell 50% more units on average to the same quantity of web customers than the group that score under 40.
That is the key right there. So, if you really are looking at the dollars and cents score, if you follow these, trying to improve in each of these areas and can score over 80, it doesn't necessarily matter that, your foot traffic, whatever, you're going to sell more units,
right?
Even regard with the same amount of traffic that you've had. And it's just you're executing, on that.
And this is one of those invisible areas where a general manager, even if they're looking at a dashboard, it may be misleading them. It may be saying, oh yeah, we responded to this lead. Oh, sure you did. You sent out an auto response or a generic
Right.
salesperson template.
Yeah, the auto response it's a response, but it's definitely not the like, hey, if you want personal service or whatever, auto response doesn't cut it. It's
Right.
just, yeah. But I think through using some AI tools, which you guys I'm sure know, there's probably ways to customize things so it feels more customized and more personal, but it's still kind of automated. And or even possibly it's just you can have AI write a better response for you for your salesman who maybe can't write for a lick,
Good
which
point.
that happens plenty of times. So it kind of takes that. I think there's some people that just don't really want to write emails, and if you can just say, give me and you can customize it a little more, it's going to help. But I think you also have the type of salesman there's like the guys that are just, they talk all the time, or they're a writer, they can work the digital. It's hard to have both, sometimes you just
Good point.
so. But yeah, this is some great information here, I think, for showing the real kind of comparisons of both both, and so the biggest area really, to score above 80, you have to do all these areas right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And like I said, there are plenty of power sports dealers who do that, who do a good job. And guys, don't forget, the small power sports dealers, they have dispensation, respond once a day to start. And then once you get that nailed and you do that all the time, then you move to, hey, I'm going to do it faster. And I'm going to do it with multiple paths.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is, I think the realistic goals of once a day, once you start getting to that, then you can start looking at fine tuning your processes, because it's all about, like you said, I do really think it is about processes and habits. What was that?
Sure.
Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or something like that, just being able to understand, to be in the moment in the day, to where you're not always just putting out fires, to where you're actually looking ahead and working on what's going on in front of you, instead of, like, oh God, I got to put this out. I got to do this. I got to go,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, and there are some, other areas I think too that dealer, again, embracing digital retailing has been a big thing as far as, both sides. I mean, I think car dealers have really done an excellent job of it, and it's a more mature industry in that sense, probably ahead of most dealership models, because it's like the oldest dealership model, and they have different, you come into power sports is obviously an enthusiast game. It's a leisure, it's a sport type activity in this country anyway. So you have to hang on to every lead has to be meaningful, right?
Well said.
Car dealers, I think they have a lot, but their processes they probably go through a lot of people that aren't going to go anywhere, but they're still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
They're still doing the basic blocking and tackling,
So, Brendan, can we show you some service measurements?
Yeah.
And I'd also like to say that with the on here, the stat did both, where you respond to the customer through multiple paths. That's a step beyond responding to them at least once per day, not locking them up digitally overnight.
Right.
But doing both is quite important, because each communication path has its own rate of failure, like sending a beautifully worded email, but it goes to spam, or the rate of a customer not picking up a phone number that they don't recognize. If you only do one method, there's a high rate of no response from the customer, but hitting them through multiple paths has a much higher chance of a follow-up response, and then they're voting with how they're responding is how you would continue the conversation. Anyway, the next slide is the same thing, but Powersports and automobile compared for service telephone effectiveness. So we call with a check engine light issue to a sample of dealerships for both industries. For this one, it's the auto dealer group average. A total auto industry STE stat for this year isn't complete yet. Generally, total auto trails auto dealer group by like 2 or 3 points. So this is the closest representation. Total auto would probably be in the 60s, but maybe 60 or 61 for reference for a total score.
Still, it's a higher number than
both of them are
substantially.
Yeah, the biggest thing you see here is near the middle, rate of customer being offered an appointment for a specific date and time over the phone, 52% of the time for Powersports industry versus 90% of the time for the dealer group average. And this is calling in with a check engine light issue. And then 2 below it, the rate of the service associate insisting you just bring the vehicle in without setting up an appointment or providing additional details of where is it going to be stored, how far out. So not the kind of response you'd want for that. 41% of the time for Powersports versus only 1% of the time for the car guys.
It's a very common thing in
stark difference.
Bring it in, take a look at it,
And it's been fascinating what we've learned. So what we learned in Powersports, just bring it in, and we'll get to it when we can get to it, and we will store it outside where it gets dusty and gets rained on and gets chipped, paint chipped. It's a dissatisfier. Without any question, it's a dissatisfier.
Yeah, you don't know how long you're going to bring it in and drop it off. How long are you going to have it?
That's right.
It's like, well,
now
we're backed up right now.
You can flip that on its ear very simply by saying, I'll be happy to give you an appointment. It's Wednesday of next week. Or if you would prefer, you're welcome to bring it in and we'll try to get to it before then. Now, all of a sudden, it's a satisfier.
Yeah.
But if you just say, no, bring it in. Well, when are you going to get to it? Well, whenever we can.
Because my local dealer that I talk to, I go in there like, oh yeah, we're backed up like 3 weeks,
Right.
But are they booking out 3 weeks, or are they saying just bring it in and we'll get to it in 3 weeks?
That's it.
And that's, I think there's a little difference in that, you're not using your motorcycle or side-by-side. Sometimes motorcycle is your commuting vehicle, but it's usually not it's not your sole way of, getting to your job and getting groceries and stuff. But, you still don't want to have it locked up for 3 weeks either.
Right.
Especially during a season where you've only got limited time.
That's exactly it. And especially for something where you can continue riding it.
Right.
Like,
where it's not a big deal. It's you could still ride around it, but So if you say, hey, we got an appointment 3 weeks from Wednesday here, bring it in. We'll, we can get to it then, but we can turn it around and within a day or two or whatever of us looking at it. But let's, you can ride it up until then.
And to be clear, there are plenty of Powersports dealerships that do a really good job with this. Again, this is the average. So there are dealers at the bottom end of that average, and there are dealers that are all the way at the top of that average.
How many Powersports dealers are you seeing using some of that and I've heard more about this lately, that using the automated service scheduling, which I've heard good and bad about, I think car dealers do it a lot. I know my BMW dealer does it, and I kind of don't like it because I want to talk to somebody,
It depends on the repair or let's say the malady. So if it's an oil change, it's pretty convenient to schedule it online.
Yeah.
But if it's a clunk in the left front suspension, I need to talk to somebody about that. So we at Pied Piper are all over that with the car guys. So we measure AI chatbots. So you call up and you actually just interact with an AI. We measure that. There are pros and cons of that. And we also measure online service scheduling. So to answer to your question, Brendan, in auto right now, about 25 to 30% of the service work is scheduled online.
Okay.
And interestingly, it is not generational. It's not as if, oh, the baby boomers never do that, and the Gen Zers always. No. It really goes back to what we said before. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
I can tell you that if we fast forward 3-4 years, the chatbot AI will be brilliant. It will be infallible.
Right.
Today, it still has some issues.
Right.
And typically the issue that we find in automotive is that if you call and interact with a chatbot, and let's say, for sake of argument, I need an oil change, but I also have a recall. So can I stay? Should I plan to stay? Will it only take an hour, or will it take a day? Do I need a ride or a rental car or whatever it is, Uber? The chatbot won't answer me, but it may not be.
Let's not compute.
Yeah, it may not be easy for me to get out. It's kind of like getting caught in a phone tree. Mm-hmm. I may not be able to get it. And then the other thing that we've learned, we just released this in the past month or two. If a car dealership today is using one of those chatbots and the chatbot can't answer it, and you get transferred to a human, that experience today is not good. Yeah. Those calls get dropped. There's nobody there waiting to answer it. It's almost like if you think about nowadays, if you're looking at a computer screen and you have the ability to chat with somebody, you're always a little suspect. Is there actually somebody manning that? And it's sort of the same with these car dealerships and the chatbot. Well, they figure, the chatbot can answer it.
Right.
A lot of times
you don't have to get that. Yeah. Like the chat, the bot will take care of it all, which, to the rate of AI and way it's moving, and Cameron, you probably can understand that, it's probably moving so fast that pretty soon it's going to be able to answer all these things and do all these things. And you'll soon forget that you're talking to a chat bot, because if it can answer, in the end, you just want to get the answers and get the appointment made and to, be taken care of. So whether it's a chat bot that can, and I don't know, I think AI can help Powersports in a lot of ways, bridge this gap because we're undermanned in so many respects, but also helping with the processes as you're talking about, but it still it's not going to be able to change your oil. It's not going to be able to, to some degree, motorcycles still, but a lot of motorcycles still have carburetors, they don't have, you can't plug in a scanner on them, but a lot of them you can, but even still, they're not fixing themselves unless it's a software thing. And you still have to have somebody. Service is still that part where AI can only do so much.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway, so in the dealer group study, we had a sample where we specifically went through the AI path, and then from that same sample of dealerships, we bypassed them and purposely tried to speak with a human, and then compare that to the total dealer group average. I think the snapshot today, considering that AI improves and changes rapidly, this will be outdated next year and the year after. But current AI, if it can actually handle the call, which is about 90% of the time, because we're measuring proactive behaviors, we're not trying to lead along the service associate. AI actually did really well, mainly because they're following a good script. So, for example, the fourth measurement down, the rate of asking if there's other issues or they need additional services, upselling opportunity, AI actually did that higher rate than the humans.
Oh,
mainly because of consistency there. But so when it does it right, the 90% of the time, it does about 10 points higher average SE score versus the human counterparts. But for those 9% of the time, 9 to 10% of the time when it couldn't handle the call, it completely fell apart. And the average score was at least 10 points lower. And more than half the time when transferring to a human, there'd be a problem. Our hunch is that a lot of the cases, AI is kind of being used in place of staffing. So it's kind of being used as a crutch. So if you do have
Right.
to bypass the AI, you're going to go straight to voicemail, or they're not ready for it.
Right.
So you have to make sure to use it as a useful tool.
Call.
Yeah. Have to make sure to use it as an actual beneficial tool, not as a crutch. And another issue that if that transfer fails, that's going to be on average 2+ minutes into the call. That's worse than getting a voicemail
getting
from the get-go.
frustrated
You wasted 2
customers.
minutes of your time.
Right. You're getting frustrated callers at that point going, this stupid AI ran me in circles, and now you're ticked
kind of
off.
a false promise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do see, like you said, I think by next year and 5 years out, it's going to be a different story. But it's still it's interesting that the handoff, I think, will be because people are just not going to be used to picking up the phone anymore, and especially for some of the stuff, it's going to be like, what? There's a phone call. Do I have to answer that, or something? Who's getting this?
Mhm.
I think the good old fashioned still being able to get through to somebody. I feel like in Powersports, although they're undermanned and everything. Although your numbers don't necessarily show that Powersports are doing it, so they probably are using it more as a crutch, and they're not, but we need to have more attentiveness, if it's going to go through to a service department. And techs, they don't want to answer I've been a tech myself. I've been, a race mechanic, I've worked in service departments. You don't want to answer the phone. You're just, that's the last thing you really want to do. That's, you're like, I'm busy working on this bike over here. So, being able to pay attention to it, or maybe having somebody that is able to, like a BDC center, whatever, that can pass out the right calls to like, hey, this is a bat phone alert, pick up type thing. No, this is really excellent stuff, guys. I've really, it's illuminating. Are there any other charts you have, or are these the two?
These are
I
the
think
two.
that's it for the time being, Brendan. But we do share the Powersports industry studies with manufacturers.
Okay. And we have, of course, we've got our links to the full studies that you've done recently, so we can, certainly highlight that stuff and link to it. But yeah, guys, I really appreciate you coming on especially this early in the morning out on the West Coast. So, I'm sure you must be natural early risers. I don't know. I'm.
The day starts early because of the East Coasters.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I feel like I'm more of a natural West Coast time. Like when I'm out there, I'm like, I feel so good. Like I can get up at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m, and it's like, 10 o'clock, my body's saying, oh yeah, you're sleeping in. So, well, hey guys, thanks so much again. And we'll stay in touch, and, we'd love to have you come out to our Accelerate conference.
If you like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We also invite you to connect with us on powersportsbusiness.com.